So then we can begin. Okay, hello everyone. I'm Sahas Barwe. I'm the program director for Avian Ecology here. And as is every year, the last Thursday of July is the fixed pledge date for two of our interns. We've been really fortunate to have another great set of interns, and I'm both happy and sad to see Hannah and Maria pledge soon. Okay, so we're going to start with Hannah's presentation. I'm really proud to introduce Hannah Peters. Hannah got her double Bachelor of Science in Wildlife and Conservation Biology and Animal Science and Technology from the University of Rhode Island, where she also got an Academic Excellence Award in Wildlife Conservation Biology. Hannah is an excellent birder and is also a trained veterinary technician. She's also a wonderful artist and makes a killer mac and cheese. Before coming to Archbold, she worked in the Chalfoon Lab at the University of Wyoming, where she worked on sagebrush songbirds and has had lots of great work experiences before that. Every year, we try to hire someone who has significant nest searching experience. And this year, Hannah was the one for us. And she did not disappoint. Hannah was quick to learn and found the most nests of any intern, and probably by a long margin. She even found a nest that neither Tori, Stephen, or I could find. And guess what? It was on the ground, like many of her other sagebrush friends. Her project on mate choice in Florida scrub jays is one that's close to my heart, and her results are so interesting, but I won't give too much away. Hannah worked really hard on picking through decades of census data to curate a data set that is truly unique in the bird literature. Along the way, she invented fun games like, is this incest real or fake? While Hannah is still figuring out her next steps, I have no doubt that she'll be studying birds for the rest of her life. Give a big hand to Hannah Peters.
Hello, I'm Hannah. Thank you all for coming to my webinar today. I did my project on social and environmental mate choice in Florida scrub jays. So mate choice is perhaps one of the most important processes shaping animal populations. The individual that an animal chooses to mate with can influence their reproductive success, the survival of its offspring, and ultimately, after many mate decisions, the evolutionary trajectory of their species. So songbird mate choice studies often emphasize morphological traits under selection, things like plumage coloration, where a male with more vibrantly colored feathers might attract more females, or elaborate behavioral displays like many bird of paradise species are known for, their courtship dances. Satin bowerbirds, which is that guy up there, build these stick formations and then decorate them with whatever brightly colored things that they can find to prove their worth to the female. Special ornamentation, like the bowerbird's long tail, is really valuable to a bird like him because female widow birds select for extreme tail length. So the thing about all of these traits is that they can be pretty easily quantified. You can measure the length of the widow bird's tail. You can count the number of sticks or decorations in the bowerbird's display. You can compare aspects of a mating dance between males to determine which makes one male more successful than another. And by doing that, you can draw conclusions about mate choice. But what aren't often studied are the social and environmental factors impacting a bird's mate choice decision. And for pretty good reason. In most wild bird populations, we couldn't know the intricacies of a bird's social life like we do with the jays here. And because these factors aren't as tangible to us, we don't understand their role in sexual selection as well. Okay. So we know that Florida scrub jays are usually permanently monogamous, with some rare cases of divorce and polygamy, but usually they remain a pair until one of them dies. While males and females look monomorphic to us, they do have sexually dimorphic UV blue coloration. So the males have brighter blue feathers, and they can tell each other apart by sex, even though they look the same to us. They have a strong pair bond that is constantly being reinforced. But otherwise, we don't particularly know how scrub jays are attracting one another as mates. So whatever behavioral displays or attractive characteristics that they have, is pretty poorly understood to attract one another. So research that is done on pair formation often focuses on methods of territory acquisition rather than how individuals are actually choosing each other. So today I'm going to be focusing on replacement as a method of pair formation, which is when one bird in a breeding pair dies and is replaced by a new bird coming into the territory through that breeding opening. So I wanted to find out what variables were associated with mate choice in widowed Florida scrub jays. I had a lot of other more specific questions about what the repairing process looks like when a bird is widowed. Sometimes a new breeder moves in right away. Sometimes it takes a long time for a breeding opening to be filled. But in my contemplation, about how scrub jays might know who's available and when, I imagined a scrub jay dating app, which is a concept that I wanted to put out there. So the variables that I decided to investigate were all of these. So territory size, whether or not widows were selecting individuals from larger or smaller territories, age difference, if breeders were selecting birds younger or older than themselves, group size, so if breeders were selecting birds from smaller or larger family sizes, distance between breeder and candidate, so however many territories a bird has to cross to get to their new territory. I also looked at helping experience, if birds preferred replacements with more months of helping experience, and also kinship to see if widowed birds were avoiding pairing with birds that were closely related to them. So I used 45 years of long-term demography data that we have here at Archbold. And this data is the only reason that I could do a project like this in the first place, since not many other study systems have this kind of have recorded this kind of extremely detailed data on individuals. So using this data, I identified individual pairing events when a widowed breeder formed a new pair. And for each pairing event, the bird who was chosen as a new mate was compared with all of the other available candidates of the opposite sex within 3 territories of the established breeder. So I narrowed down the candidate pool to the closest 3 territories because the jays generally don't disperse very far from their natal territories. Females do tend to disperse farther than males, but the majority of birds in my data set were not crossing more than 2 territories, a couple territories to get to their new mate. So I decided to restrict the candidate pool to keep it more realistic in terms of who is actually available to the established breeder. In the unrestricted version, each pairing event had about 30 candidates on average, and in the restricted version, there's an average of 8.53 candidate birds per pairing event. So anyway, this is a very simplified version of how my data was organized. It was organized by pairing event ID and the established breeder's ID, and then it had all of the available candidates that were available at the month and year that the breeder formed a new pair. And then the bird who was chosen was distinguished by a 1 or 0 in that column. And then I had a lot of other columns and rows detailing all of the variables that I talked about in the last slide. And then I used generalized linear mixed models to evaluate all of these variables. So these are my results. This figure shows the effect size of all of the variables that I looked at for both male and female breeders. So the blue points are male breeders choosing female candidates, and the red points are female breeders choosing male candidates. And significance is indicated by the asterisks of respective colors. So I'm just going to walk through each of these one at a time. So for territory size, males preferred females from smaller territories, and females trended towards preferring males from larger territories, but it was not significant. While the effect was significant for males, it was the second weakest effect that I found, but it was one of the main sex differences between males and females. For age difference, this was non-significant for male breeders. It was significant for females, but it was also a relatively weak effect. Nonetheless, the probability of a female breeder choosing a male candidate is 8.9% higher for each year that the male is younger than the female. Group size is pretty interesting because I didn't expect it to have such a strong effect, but both male and female breeders prefer to mate with birds that come from smaller group sizes. And a female candidate is 45% less likely to be chosen and a male candidate is 47% less likely to be chosen per each additional member in their family group. Territories crossed was my second strongest predictor variable, with both males and females preferring to mate with the closest birds available to them. This was a stronger effect for female breeders, with the probability of a male being chosen as a mate decreasing by 84.1% for every additional territory crossed, and for replacement female mates, a 70.5% decrease for each additional territory crossed. Helping experience was also significant for male and female breeders. The probability of being chosen by a male breeder increased by 3.7% per additional month of helping experience, and the chance of being chosen by a female breeder increased by 5.8% per month of additional experience. So while the effect doesn't look particularly strong on this figure, helping experience was measured in months. So when you account for a whole additional year of helping experience, this is actually a pretty significant factor in mate choice decision. Kinship was by far the strongest predictor variable, with both males and females strongly preferring to choose unrelated birds. I used pedigree data to calculate the kinship coefficient between every breeder and candidate. So this effect is pretty strong, so it doesn't, I don't think, interpret as well on the slide, so I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. So I just want to show you exactly how many pairs were formed in each category of relatedness. And as you can see, the vast majority of chosen birds are unrelated to the widowed breeder. And so there were relatively few pairs formed between related birds, especially with least being between sibling pairs and parent-offspring pairs. There were only 4 pairs formed in this category in my data set. There would have been 5 if I had been using this year's data, because we did have a mother and son pair form this year. So to put it like in simpler terms, a full sibling or parent offspring of a male breeder was 88.2% less likely to be chosen than an unrelated bird, and female breeders were 89.5% less likely to choose a full sibling over an unrelated bird. So pretty similar, and most of these comparisons that I made between sexes were pretty similar for kinship. Also, as I mentioned before, there were about 8.5 candidates per pairing event, and I found that only on average about 1 candidate per pairing event was actually a relative of the bird, that the established breeder that was looking for a new mate. So that just goes to show that most of the birds that they have available to pair with are not related to them. So overall, my results suggest that mate choice in Florida scrub jays is strongly influenced by the social and spatial environment in which the individuals live. So spatial proximity was one of the strongest predictors of pair formation. Birds were much more likely to choose mates from nearby territories than from farther away. And one possible explanation for that is that individuals have greater familiarity with birds that are closer through repeated interactions with them. So familiarity has been found to increase attractiveness in other bird species. And familiarity may allow breeders to assess characteristics such as helping experience, age, or just the overall quality of a candidate before a breeding opportunity arises. This also supports what we know about how survivorship and breeding success increases when birds breed closer to their natal territories. Second, the social environment appears to play an important role in mate choice as well. Candidates from larger group sizes were less likely to be selected by both male and female breeders, and this could be because birds in larger groups could face larger competition for breeding opportunities and could reduce their likelihood of pairing. Group size could also reflect broader social conditions that can influence when and where individuals disperse. Helping experience was also positively associated with pair formation. This suggests that experienced helpers may be more attractive mates or may just simply be better positioned to acquire breeding opportunities. longer helping experience could indicate greater social competence, familiarity with local conditions, or skills related to reproduction and territory defense. And finally, I found evidence for kin avoidance. So even after accounting for spatial proximity, birds were less likely to pair with close relatives. This is particularly important in Florida scrub jays because dispersal distances are often short, meaning that individuals frequently encounter and interact with their kin. So these results suggest that mechanisms promoting inbreeding avoidance may play an important role in maintaining the genetic diversity within the population. So in conclusion, mate choice is multifactorial, and while there may be morphological aspects that the jays are selecting for when choosing a new mate, there are certainly a lot more going on that we can't understand just by observing them day to day out in the scrub. And so these findings could also be applicable to help clarify mate choice mechanisms in other socially complex passerines, particularly other cooperative breeders or monogamous species. So just to wrap things up, I wanted to quickly go back to my scrub jay dating app idea and have you all guess which female that this breeding male chose. So this is RVS Dash. He's 3 years old and his mate died. So these are eligible lady jays in the candidate pool, and one of them is his new mate. So candidate 1 is a helper from 3 territories away. She comes from a family of 5. She has almost 2 years of helping experience, and she's also distantly related to our breeder. Candidate 2 is an available breeder. And so she's currently unpaired. Maybe her mate died too. She comes from a family of 4. She has 37 months of helping experience. She's not related to the breeder. And candidate 3 is 2 territories away. Comes from a nice small family of 2, has 10 months of helping experience, and is also not related. So based on what you know from my presentation, raise your hand if you think that RBS Dash picked candidate 1. Candidate 2. Candidate 3. Yay! So he chose candidate number 2. She's a bird close by, has lots of helping experience, is already a breeder, so that's a plus. She doesn't come from the smallest family size, but you can't have everything. And so this is based on a real example from my data set. Of course, there was more than 3 candidates in her pool in my data set, but yeah. So this is a real pairing event from my project. And thank you. Thank you for coming to my seminar. Thank you especially to everyone in Bird Lab. Thank you for hiring me and the opportunity to have such a great experience here and work with such cool birds and on a project. I really appreciate it. I've learned so much since being here, and thank you to all my fellow interns who have made the last 6 months here especially special. You're all so cool and awesome.
For Anna. Yeah, those are your talk. Do they always repair?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And is that because they have territory and like because they're like higher up in the?
So usually, if one breeder dies, it's like if a male breeder dies, sometimes the female will just disperse on her own and go off somewhere because the females tend to disperse farther. But generally, they'll like maintain their territory that they have established, and a new bird will move in.
I think I just missed it, but why did they prefer smaller birds from smaller territory size?
I didn't want to make too many assumptions about that because I don't have a lot of context for the territory size part of it. I don't have any kind of like territory quality data also associated with that. So it's something that I would kind of want to look further into and analyze further.
So thinking a little bit further about that question, what would have happened if you looked at the success of the territory, whether it has actually produced surviving young or number of surviving young? Presumably a neighboring territory would have a very good idea of how well they're doing, not just whether they're there.
Yeah, like for breeders, if the breeders are successful
Yeah,
versus.
even though one disappeared, how did the nest do the year before?
Yeah, I think that would probably play a role in whether or not like spatial proximity increases familiarity between birds. So birds living in a neighboring territory would probably know whether or not they had successfully bred that year and produced offspring, might make them more attractive as a breeding opening to fill.
Well, thank you so much, Hannah.